All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Turf podcast. I've got another great interview today at GIS. This is day one again of the trade show. I shouldn't say that because then it shows that maybe all my work's done on the first day and nothing on the second day. Yeah. That is wrong. So today I've got an old friend of mine who a lot of the audience hopefully knows, Dr. Scott McElroy from Auburn University in Alabama. Scott came out to Australia a couple of years ago for the New Zealand Turf Conference. We also had him had a bit of a whirlwind tour, and we did a walk and talk in Sydney, then we did a walk and talk in Melbourne over 2 days. Then he went to New Zealand, then he went home. So it was a whirlwind tour, but good to have him back on the podcast after my trip to Auburn University that same year as well. Welcome.
Yeah, good day, Nadine.
Love the Aussie accent.
Yeah, that's all you get, though.
That's all right. Well, last time we met up with each other, you were still working on turf research, trying to kill weeds, trying to kill Poa and everything else. But yeah, so what else have you been doing?
Oh, man, I've just been trying to solve the world's problems when it comes to weed control in turf is all I've been doing for the past however long it's been. So in all seriousness, we still do a lot of testing with herbicides, seeing how we can control and manage weeds in turf. Trying to understand a lot more about weed biology. Specifically, we work a lot on leucine indica goosegrass. And then
which is crowsfoot.
Crowsfoot
in Australia.
We go. So also working on a lot of the genetic testing. So we do in my lab we do a lot of research on herbicide resistance. So we're trying to understand not only is a new population resistant, but also how is it resistant and why is it resistant? Why is it evolving that? So we do a lot of trying to understand what mutations are present, and we do primarily working in Poa and in leucine. So those are the two species we really focus on, and then doing just a lot of odd side things. You know, we have some studies. We've looked at dwarf goosegrass, so it's a micro goosegrass, and trying to understand the mechanism behind that. How did that adapt, and various other things. If it's a plant people don't want, typically I'm playing around with it or messing with it or something.
So, and you've got the lab to do the resistance testing and the likes like that. Are you, the samples that you get in, are you seeing a growth in resistant strains, resistant cultivars, resistant weeds, essentially, to different modes of action?
So one of the things we focus on a lot is on Ronstar, oxidizon. So I would say that oxidizon resistance is definitely, I think it's there. We're just really starting to document the extent to which it is present. It's been really unique to work, and thanks to Bayer, by the way, who's a big sponsor of my research in the U.S. They actually sponsor a lot of the testing we do to find oxidizon resistance. So we really focus on that one a lot.
Are you seeing as well to the other group, like your Barricade, your Embargo, your Horizon actives as well? Are you seeing, and Dimension with dithiopy, are you seeing resistance to that mode of action?
Yes, so we just found a cross-resistant population that's resistant to dithiopyr, Horizon, and Pendulum, and Barricade as well. So we found one of those. And then we work a lot on Poa because we're part of this USDA Specialty Crop Research Initiative that it's about 13 universities are involved with this, and we do all the genetic testing, and we're looking for genetic relationships to try to determine, are these populations are these new populations that are evolving resistance, or are we just spreading around the same population that developed resistance? So we want to understand that. And so we are finding cross-resistant. I had to go back in my head. What was the original question again?
To the pre-emergent herbicides.
Pre-emergent herbicides, yeah. To Poa, it is completely widespread resistance to those herbicides.
And nothing yet to indaziflame, which is spectacle. There hasn't been any known resistance.
I think the people are reporting some resistance now. I'm not sure the degree to which it is, but you may want to speak to some other weed people if you talk with them. We've tested several populations, and I think there's a wide swath of sensitivity there, but I wouldn't necessarily call those resistance. Those are just that's just inherent resistance is what I've seen. I don't know what other people have seen. I'm hearing rumors of potential what people are saying, but for me, it's just kind of inherent variability we see in populations.
And the ALS inhibitors, the SU herbicides, your Monument, Revolver, as we got as Tribute and the likes, and are they still a tool for POA in the US, or pretty much that is, or are people just using them because they still work on other weeds, but for POA management, are they still being used?
Oh yeah, I would say so. I would say that we see a high level of resistance for POA, especially to those SU herbicides, but that does not mean they need to stop being used. A lot of times. So if you think about your underlying seed bank that exists within the soil, as you select for a plant that may be resistant, it's going to produce thousands of seed, and those are going to go into the soil after that point. So your next generation, your population, is not going to just be all resistant. It's going to be a mixture of susceptibles and resistant. Well, if you just switch to a new herbicide, well, you're exposing both of those different genotypes, whether it's a resistant seed out of the soil or a susceptible seed that still lives in the soil, you're exposing it to another herbicide. Well, what you may do is you'll just finally select for resistance to that herbicide, but a lot of times what needs to be done is keep using that same herbicide alongside of it, because it's continuing to control all the susceptibles out there, and the resistant seed that germinate are only exposed to that new herbicide. They're the ones killed by that.
Would you then, more so from a management strategy, would you advocate tank mixing then the two modes of action?
Yes, I'm a tank mix advocate. I'm not a rotation advocate. But tank mixing needs to be referred to as like season mixing. So it's not just about tank mixing two herbicides, but you need to take that generation, that season of seed that are going to germinate and grow. You need to expose those to multiple modes of action for management. Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to let...
Come in, Stan.
Okay. Yeah, we're good. So, that subtle interruption there. Keep moving. So, think about it like this. So, the first thing you need to do is do management practices that reduce the weed populations down as low as possible. So, higher mode turf, denser turf, not doing soil disturbance things when germination is going to occur, that reduces the number of species that are going to be exposed to a herbicide, reduces it down. Because resistance is a numbers game, is all it is. The more individuals of a given species that you expose to that herbicide, the greater the chance of resistance. So the greatest resistance management we have in turf is turfgrass management itself, because we can reduce the number of plants we actually need to expose to a herbicide. So if we can do that, and then you think for that season, you need to season mix herbicides. Not really, I don't say tank mix. Tank mixing is good, but it's all about in that one growing season, you want to expose it to multiple modes of action, up to 2 modes of action. And that way, your chances of resistance development to either of those is going to decrease.
And you would change it from year to year as well. What you did one year in mixing, flip it on its head the year after.
I wouldn't say so. You could probably keep the same thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think there's any need for, if you don't have any resistance at all, there's probably any need for changing. Yeah. Once you get a good mix of different modes of action, at least 2, then and you feel comfortable with that, I would say you can just keep that. Because you think about it like this. So if the chances of finding an individual that's resistant to one herbicide is 1 out of a billion, okay, 1 out of a billion. The chances of finding it to 2 is 1 out of a billion times 1 out of a billion. I'm not really sure what that number is, but it's a lot of zeros.
It's a big number.
It's a big number. So 1 out of a really big is doubled number, okay? So that's why you look at one mode of action, and you probably look at about 7 to 10 years if you just use that mode of action before you select for resistance. But if you look at 2 modes of action, you're probably up in the 80 to 90 years, and I think many of you will be retired in 80 to 90 years.
No, that's it. And in terms of mode of action, there's the only new one coming out. Obviously, we've spoken about it before, and a lot of the people know on the podcast about Poa Cure coming out, which is going to definitely be a great tool. But is there anything else on the horizon to sort of aid that another generation of another mode of action for Poa control?
Yeah. No. There's not. No.
So it's going to make things difficult. So we really have to, what we've got to make sure we keep it for the long term.
Yeah, right.
Not,
Yeah, and just to give you an idea, if you look at bentgrass putting greens, crabgrass, and goosegrass control, crowsfoot,
and summergrass.
and summergrass. If you look at those two for in bentgrass greens in the U.S., they have one herbicide. Well, two, but they're both pre-emerge herbicides, and one's a bit dicey.
Yeah.
So
That's it. Well, we don't have any pre-emergent registered, as I believe, on greens. It's too risky. So we have a post-emergent on fairways and the likes like that. One thing that I think I remember speaking to you, we still got DSMA, which is good to have. There's still some MSMA here in the US, but that's pretty much on its way out.
Yeah, right.
So at least we've got the DSMA still there. So it is definitely an option. So hopefully we do right, and the people listening to this start thinking about really changing their agronomic practices culturally, but also in terms of the mode of actions. Really do mix it up, because otherwise we're not going to be able to give 10 years time. It'd be crazy what we're not going to have. We'll have Poa everything.
Right.
and goosegrass, crowsfoot, everything. I know the guys in Queensland hopefully listening to this, because they have big problems up there with crowsfoot, and it's getting more and more difficult to control, and they are getting it in the greens as well. So that's they don't really have many options in terms of that for greens high.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. All right, Scott, thank you very much again for being on the podcast
My
for
pleasure.
Behind the Turf. Hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and speak to you all next episode.